Ethan Cole finished checking the atmospheric regulators on Deck 7 of Orbital Haven, a massive multi-species research station orbiting a gas giant. His job as maintenance engineer was straightforward: keep systems running, fix what breaks, stay invisible. He preferred it that way: quiet, professional, no complications. Walking back to his quarters, he rounded a corner and stopped short. Dr. Lyria Sen stood outside her door, adjusting something on her outfit with visible discomfort. Ethan knew her by reputation: Valoran astrophysicist, brilliant but completely unapproachable. She'd been on the station for 2 years and barely spoke to anyone outside, required professional interactions. But tonight, she looked completely different. Instead of her usual practical work clothes, she wore traditional Valoran formal attire: flowing fabric in deep blues and silvers, elegant lines that complemented her distinctive pointed ears, and the luminescent markings along her skin. The dress was stunning, clearly expensive, meant for important occasions. She looked uncomfortable in it, like she'd forgotten how to wear such things. Ethan didn't plan to speak. She clearly valued her privacy. But the words came out before he could stop them. "That dress looks beautiful on you." Lyria froze completely. Her luminescent markings shifted rapidly: surprise, confusion, something else Ethan couldn't read. She turned to face him, those large Valoran eyes studying him with an intensity that made him suddenly aware he'd overstepped. The silence stretched. Ethan mentally kicked himself. She was famously private, and he'd just commented on her appearance uninvited. Brilliant. Then, slowly, her expression shifted. A genuine smile, small, tentative, but real, crossed her face. "Thank you," she said quietly. Her voice carried the melodic quality typical of Valorans, but with a roughness that suggested disuse in casual conversation. Before Ethan could respond, she stepped into her quarters and gently closed the door. Not slammed, not rushed, just closed deliberately, with that small smile still visible as the door sealed. Ethan stood in the corridor, confused by the interaction, but somehow certain it had mattered in ways he didn't understand. Inside her quarters, Lyria leaned against the closed door, her markings still flickering with surprise. A compliment. A simple, sincere compliment from someone who didn't know her history, didn't know that tonight was the first time in 3 years she'd worn traditional dress for herself instead of obligation. Her hand touched the fabric of the dress, remembering why she'd stopped wearing such things. Remembering Kale, her partner, who'd loved seeing her in formal attire. Remembering the accident that took him, the guilt that drove her to isolation. But tonight, preparing for a holographic connection to a Valoran cultural ceremony, she'd chosen the dress deliberately. A small step toward reclaiming parts of herself she'd abandoned to grief. And a human maintenance engineer she'd never spoken to had noticed, had said something kind without knowing its significance. Lyria's markings shifted to something warmer. Maybe opening doors, even just a crack, wasn't as impossible as she'd thought. Over the following weeks, Ethan noticed changes. Dr. Lyria Sen acknowledged him in corridors now. Not just the professional nod everyone gave colleagues, but actual eye contact, sometimes a small smile. Once, passing in the cafeteria, she said, "The atmospheric fix on Deck 7 has been working perfectly." Good work. It was a small thing, but coming from someone who barely spoke to anyone, it felt significant. Ethan learned more about her through careful observation and occasional station gossip. Valoran astrophysicist, specialized in stellar formation, published extensively, worked alone always. She attended required meetings but declined all social invitations. Her quarters were her sanctuary. She rarely left except for work. The formal attire incident made sense now. She must have been attending some kind of cultural event remotely, maintaining ties to her homeworld despite her isolation. 3 weeks after their corridor encounter, Ethan was doing routine checks on Deck 5 when he passed Lyria's quarters. Her door was open, unusual, and he could hear frustrated muttering in Valoran. He paused, debating. Respecting privacy was important, but she sounded genuinely distressed. "Dr. Sen, everything all right?" Lyria appeared in the doorway, her markings showing irritation and embarrassment. "The holographic projector is malfunctioning. I have a conference call in 20 minutes and the visual feed keeps distorting. I can take a look if you'd like." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with someone entering her space, then nodded. Please. I've tried standard fixes, but engineering isn't my specialty. Ethan entered her quarters, neat, minimal decoration, dominated by astronomical charts and research data. The holographic projector sat in the corner, display flickering erratically. He examined it, quickly identified the problem. Loose connection in the primary relay. Simple fix. While he worked, Lyria hovered nearby, watching with scientific interest. You approach problems differently than I do, she observed. I start with theoretical frameworks. You start with practical observation. Different training. You understand why things work. I understand how to make them work. Complementary skills. Exactly. He finished the repair, tested the projector, perfect clarity. Should be stable now. Thank you. Lyria's markings showed genuine gratitude. I appreciate the help. And the discretion. Discretion, not mentioning that the brilliant astrophysicist can't fix a simple projector. She said it with self-deprecating humor that surprised him. Ethan smiled. Your secret's safe. Besides, I can't calculate stellar formation to save my life, so we're even. Something shifted in her expression, like she'd forgotten people could be easy to talk to. Would you? She started, then stopped. If you have time, I'd like to understand the repair, so I can fix it myself next time. They spent the next 30 minutes with Ethan explaining the projector's mechanics, Lyria asking thoughtful questions, both discovering that explaining their respective fields to each other was oddly enjoyable. When Ethan finally left for his next maintenance check, Lyria watched the door close with an unfamiliar feeling. She didn't want the conversation to end. Maybe isolation wasn't as necessary as she'd convinced herself. The collaboration became regular. Not planned, but natural. Ethan's rounds brought him past Lyria's area frequently, and she started leaving her door open when working, a silent invitation. Sometimes they talked about technical problems, sometimes about research, occasionally about nothing important, just conversation for its own sake. Ethan learned that Lyria was funny in a dry, understated way, that she loved ancient Valoran poetry, that she could explain complex astrophysics in ways that actually made sense to him. Lyria learned that Ethan noticed details others missed, small kindnesses that made the station run smoother, that he'd chosen maintenance work deliberately, finding satisfaction in fixing things, that he listened more than he spoke. 2 months after the dress incident, Lyria invited Ethan for tea in her quarters, a formal gesture in Valoran culture, signifying respect and friendship. They sat across from each other, tea steaming between them, and for the first time, Lyria spoke about her past. I had a partner, Kale. He died 3 years ago in a research accident. We were studying stellar collapse, and the containment field failed. Her markings shifted to deep purple, grief in Valoran expression. I wasn't there. I'd stayed behind to analyze data. He went to the observation platform alone. Ethan listened without interrupting. I blamed myself. Still do, some days. If I'd been there, maybe I could have done something, or maybe I'd have died too, which seemed preferable for a long time. She paused. I left Valoran space, took positions on remote stations, stopped participating in social aspects of our culture, stopped wearing formal attire except when absolutely required for ceremonial connections. The dress I saw you in that night was the first time in years I'd chosen to wear traditional clothing for myself, not obligation. There was a cultural ceremony I wanted to attend, not had to attend. A small step toward reclaiming my identity instead of just existing in grief. She met his eyes. Your compliment that night. You couldn't have known, but it mattered. It acknowledged a choice I'd made, a step forward I was terrified of taking. Ethan felt the weight of that moment differently now. I'm glad I said something then. So am I. Her markings shifted to warmer tones. You've been patient with me, never pushed, never asked why I'm so isolated, just present when I needed presence. Everyone heals at their own pace. Yes, but having someone who doesn't judge that pace, that's rare. They sat in comfortable silence, tea cooling between them, both aware that something had shifted, not rushed, not dramatic, just a quiet deepening of connection built on respect and genuine care. Lyria's door remained open after Ethan left. A small change, but significant. Months passed. Ethan and Lyria's friendship evolved into something neither wanted to name, but both recognized. Quiet affection, mutual respect, the comfortable intimacy of people who genuinely understand each other. They shared meals regularly now, collaborated on projects that crossed their disciplines, attended station events together occasionally, Lyria gradually becoming less isolated, more present. Her colleagues noticed the change, commenting on how Dr. Sen seemed lighter somehow, more engaged. Then came another formal Valoran ceremony, a significant one, celebrating stellar cartographers and researchers. Lyria had contributed important work to the field and was being recognized. She appeared at Ethan's door that evening, and he caught his breath. The dress was even more elaborate than the first one he'd seen, deep midnight blue with silver thread that caught light like stars, traditional Valoran craftsmanship at its finest. Her markings glowed with warm golden tones, confidence, pride, joy. "I'm attending the ceremony tonight," she said. "It's important, and I wanted you to see this before I go." Ethan understood what she wasn't saying. She was choosing to share this part of herself with him, trusting him with her cultural identity and the vulnerability of stepping back into her former life. "You look beautiful," he said. The same words from months ago, but now weighted with everything they'd built since. Lyria smiled, that genuine smile he'd first seen in the corridor, but fuller now, unguarded. "Thank you for seeing me. For that first compliment when I needed to hear it, for everything since." She didn't close the door this time. Instead, she stepped back, inviting him in. "Would you like to watch the ceremony with me? I could explain the traditions, the significance, if you're interested." "I'd like that very much." They sat together, watching the holographic ceremony unfold. Lyria explained each element, the symbolic gestures, the poetry recitations, the recognition of researchers who'd advanced Valoran understanding of the cosmos. When her own work was acknowledged, her markings flared with emotion. Ethan reached for her hand instinctively. She took it, squeezing gently. "Kale would have been proud of this work," she said quietly. "We started it together. He would be proud of you for continuing it, for healing enough to accept recognition. I'm still healing. Some days are harder than others. That's okay. Healing isn't linear." After the ceremony ended, they remained sitting together, hands still clasped. "That first night," Lyria said, "when you complimented my dress and I closed the door, I wasn't shutting you out. I was protecting something fragile. A moment of kindness I wasn't ready to fully receive. I know, but I'm ready now to receive kindness, to offer it, to open doors instead of closing them." She turned to face him. "Thank you for being patient, for being present, for seeing me as someone worth knowing instead of someone too broken to approach. You were never broken, just grieving. There's a difference." Lyria's markings glowed warmth and affection. "Stay, we could watch the stars. I can show you stellar formations I've been studying." Ethan smiled. "I'd like that." They moved to her observation window, looking out at the cosmos. Lyria pointed out formations, explaining their significance with the passion of someone who'd rediscovered joy in their work. Ethan listened, asked questions, marveled at both the beauty of the universe and the beauty of watching someone reclaim their life from grief. That simple compliment months ago had been the first crack in walls Lyria had built around herself. Each subsequent interaction had widened those cracks until the walls crumbled completely. Now, standing together watching stars form and die in distant space, they both understood that small gestures matter most. A sincere compliment, a patient presence, a door opened instead of closed. "Thank you," Lyria said again, leaning slightly against Ethan's shoulder. "For seeing me when I'd made myself invisible. For that dress compliment that reminded me I could be more than just grief. For everything. Thank you for letting me in," Ethan replied. "For trusting me enough to open the door." Outside the window, stars burned in the darkness. Inside the quarters, two people from different worlds found that connection forms not through grand gestures, but through accumulated small kindnesses, compliments given sincerely, patience offered freely, and doors opened when ready instead of forced. Lyria had closed the door that first night, protecting something fragile and new. Now she kept it open, trusting that what they'd built together was strong enough to grow in the light. And that made all the difference.